about this?
Should I take that?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Well, do
Well,
you,
Lord's Care?
that was, you bought that.
I did, but I bought it to replace that.
Oh,
All right, we are now live streaming and on Facebook. Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to our startup panel moderated by Elisa Huang. Startups, as you know, and as you've heard in this early chat, are a hot place to be in any economy, and joining one is a big deal, especially with IPO potential. With recent public offerings by Airbnb, Snowflake, and Postmates in recent months, and today's IPO by Coinbase, Robinhood, upcoming, and others in the making, millionaires are being minted daily. Could you be qualified to join the next hot startup? Hint, you probably are. Wherever you may be in your career, startup could be the right move, and there are often roles for individuals in every single profession. That's why we brought together several startup panelists for a discussion on the startup market and what you should do to consider one as your next career move and how to make your way in. A few housekeeping items. This video is recorded and will be available on YouTube through a link in the next couple of hours once this webinar is over. I expect to send something within 72 hours. And Elisa, who is our moderator, will also have her own outline today, which she's going to cover in a couple of moments. Elisa, thank you so much for moderating this again. Over to you.
Hey, sorry, just to kick it off, it's Elisa. And
I always get that wrong, but thank you.
No, it's a quick story because it's a running joke in our company because I'm always having to talk about it, discuss it, justify it, and correct it. And so everybody's like, you should really go into business and try to make money off of that because it's like, I don't know, it's a thing. So now it's like people that get it just don't say it right because they're like, oh, it's funny, like, or are they like, I don't know, they'll call me ninja. We won't get into that, but it's just a cross that I must bear for the rest of my life. And when I have kids, I hope to haze them and come up with something just equally difficult. So if you guys have tips for that, let me know because I'm pregnant. So I'm coming up with some crazy ones for the little one. So anyhow, my name is Elisa and one of the moderators, part of the Albert's List community, humble servant, really excited to see everyone today. This has been a topic of interest for a lot of our members on just breaking into startups. There's a lot of interest there, but is it stable? Is it the same interview process as traditional companies? What does it look like? Oh, I'm hearing the echo. Can you go on mute? Okay, thank you. And so we thought, let's bring a couple of experts together, get clarity for all those that are interested, and just kind of bring the community together. So put together some panelists, and I just want to give them a couple of seconds as well to introduce themselves. And as Albert mentioned, one of our panelists, Faye, is not able to make it tonight, and she was going to share more insight on equity compensation and how that plays into during tax season, et cetera. And so certainly the other panelists can also speak to that, but we might also cover other topics more heavily. And if applicable, if there's a lot of interest in that in the chat room, let us know, and we can always schedule a follow-up session just talking about startup equity and what that looks like. So without further ado, I'll just start from the right of me and kick it off with Joseph Fung and give him a couple seconds to introduce himself and share.
Everyone, thanks for having me here. Elisa, fantastic introduction. I'm totally on the other end of the spectrum. With 2 kids, I picked really boring, easy to spell names. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you pick. That's going to be fun. For folks that are asking questions and passing them along, I'm the co-founder and CEO at Uvaro. It's a tech sales accelerator. We help people land amazing careers in tech sales. So love the job hunt process. As it relates to startups, I've been a co-founder and a CEO for about 20 years, 5 companies under my belt. one that's definitely a lost, one that's an epic win, three that are somewhere in the middle, depending on the conversation we're having. I have individually hired over 300 people into startups, so can talk about what it takes to succeed. I've had my share of firing, so I'm happy to share what didn't work. And I've run somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 interviews, so I can speak about what's worked in our space. And we help hundreds of grads land roles at tech companies, so especially in the sales area, can comment on those. So I'll shy away from any of the tax comments, Elisa, but as it relates to options, RSUs, incentive, non-incentive, happy to ref on those. This is going to be a fun chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joseph. We're so grateful that you're able to spend some time with us. I know you're on the East Coast. We'll make this fun and high impact. I'll kick it over to Joe Cardio next. This man needs no introduction, but give him a couple seconds for those that are new in the room, just to learn a little bit more about him.
Hey, what's up, everybody? So I've been part of the Albert's List group for 8 years. Wow. And I've been a group mod for a year or two now, I think it is. And yeah, I've been in and around startups since about 2013. I've hired, not nearly as many as Joseph, but a dozen or two folks into startups and worked around startups quite a bit. I'm a marketer by trade. But I've also worked across like product operations, customer support, and stuff like that. And so, a lot of experience kind of working with startups, mostly from like pre-seed to Series B, typically. So that's my sweet spot.
Awesome. Okay, Michelle.
Hey everyone, my name is Michelle. I've been with startups for probably about 5 years now, and I've been a recruiter for 7. So if you have questions just about like what to ask and what's appropriate, questions about compensation, anything like that, I am here for you. I've been on both sides, so I know a lot of the risk and the rewards of joining a startup. So I'm happy to address any of those concerns you have as well, and just to network too. So. But good to be here. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe and Michelle. And then I know Albert had mentioned, hopefully I got it right. We also have another panelist, Andrea. Would you like to come off mute? And Joe, you might know. I think it is Andrea. Yes. And share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, close enough. I prefer Andrea. So it's almost like the same.
Sorry about that, Andrea. I will remember.
It's the same story as you know. That's fine. I like my family calls me Andrea. As long as nobody refers to me as Andrea, I personally don't like that. So yeah, a little bit about me. Just like Joe, I'm a marketer as well. What's up, marketer? I've spent the last 10 years in the digital marketing realm. I began my career at a mobile advertising startup. And I've also worked and I began my career in ad tech and working alongside agencies as clients and things like that. And then when I had a brief stint as a recruiter in 2016, and I realized that there are a lot of people that don't know how to market themselves when applying for jobs. So that's when I started career coaching. I actually moderate another job group based in NYC that has over 150,000 people. And I was offering free resume reviews. And as you can imagine, with a group that large, my inbox was completely destroyed. So I've been just kind of growing from there. I've easily seen thousands of resumes in the last few years as a recruiter and a hiring manager, hiring other marketers, filling other marketing positions. And I brand myself as the millennial career coach. I get a lot of millennials and Zoomers coming to me asking for like marketing help, helping the best market themselves in a very crowded candidate marketplace. And I also help boomers, Gen Xers with the same sort of like marketing dilemma in terms of their job search. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. Some of the clients I've worked with on the marketing side included Sprint. For a year and a half, I put a mobile banner on your phone. I apologize. And I've also worked on a couple campaigns for some P&G brands, a Unilever brand, Johnson & Johnson. I've also worked with several small businesses on their marketing strategy. So I'm pretty much like marketing is in my DNA.
That's awesome. No, thank you for that. It's very illustrious. I won't forget that. It's Millennium Career Coach, right? Is that how you have it branded? And it's Andrea, right?
There you go. Yep, the millennial career
Okay.
coach.
I'm now like on alert. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna now screw it up. So
It's
hopefully that won't
okay.
happen. Well, so let's get started. I've got some general questions that I've put together that some people have submitted, but we want to keep this really informal and just very interactive. So I'm monitoring the chat as well. If you have specific questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, please go ahead and put it on the chat room, and then we can also invite you on the stage to expand more if you'd like. We want you to get the most out of this, so don't be shy. So the first one that I have is, what are 2 to 3 tips that you as panelists would recommend to get the attention of those hiring at startups? And it may or may not differ than just applying for a traditional job. So I'll start with Joe, which, by the way, do you want to go by Joseph or Joe? Does it?
Since we've already got a Joe, I'll do Joseph.
Okay, Joseph. Yeah, so from a founder's perspective, and just also and understanding recruiting, what do you feel are standouts if a startup is just getting hundreds of applications, specifically maybe in the tech space?
Totally.
What catches your eye?
So I'll share 2 things. The first one that's really good, safety net. Stalk the company on LinkedIn, because all the founders are going to be there. You'll know who the title is. Don't send it to Dear Hiring Manager. It's a founding team. It'll say they've got 12 people, 20 people. You can see them all on LinkedIn. Take the time. And that just gets you out of the chaff. But the thing that'll stand out the most, and it's terrible because I'll say this to everyone and no one actually does it, is send a video. Like, use Vidyard, use Loom, use BombBomb, all of those. And you say, hey, this is what I am, what I'm excited about. They will watch it, and they know you're going to get the analytics, and as soon as we open it up, ping us. That tells us you got hustle. So those things will differentiate. And I'll let the career coaches talk about the better ways to leverage LinkedIn and your resume and all that, because they'll have better advice than I will.
Joe, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And just to the power of that, the very first startup job that I got, I sent a video. And by the way, video is complicated, right? Because if they have a blind screening process, which many startups do not, video presents you as potentially male, female, non-gender binary. It presents race, ethnicity, and other kinds of signifiers and markers. So you have to be very careful about that. That's complicated. But having said that, it can be a very effective tactic. And the very first startup job I got, my boss who hired me said, we put your video up on the big screen, and we all watched it in the room, the 20 people you're talking about at the time. That was the size of it. Very effective tactic. And then I think, just to your point too, Joseph, when you are trying to get hired at a startup, it's super important to just go see, where are they at? What are they trying to solve at that time? Like, what problems are they really dealing with, and who's solving those problems? Because if you send a letter that's very short to the director of operations and you say, I noticed you all are trying to expand the platform in this area, and you just added this vendor to do an integration. I actually have a lot of experience with exactly those kinds of integrations. That's a different conversation right there. So
if I can jump on the riff on it, like to what Joe said, hey, I see you're working on these problems. Like, when your company's small, you have 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, you're desperately seeking attention. And I say that like full founder's hat on. When somebody knows about my company, I'm like, ooh, that's exciting. So if you've done that bit of research and you know what we're working on, and you say, hey, I saw this, I care about that, that feels really good as a founder. And that excitement is compelling. It's founders are really easy and do a great job of getting distracted and making quick decisions based on that kind of excitement. So if you want to optimize that, show that you care about their startup, and that'll take your interview further.
Yeah, I was going to add that startups are very mission driven. We're very driven by our cause and our product. So if at any time you can show us why you're passionate about what we're doing, then I'm interested, right? Like, so that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. And I think, Joseph, you really talked about that really well. So yeah, just remember what the vision is and how you want to contribute to that. And I think it really kind of shines through, especially if you're making a video. That's fantastic. People can really truly see what you're passionate about if it is that startup, like when you're just talking in the video. So I think those are all really good suggestions.
would like to add to what Joseph was saying about LinkedIn. I want to share my experience about how I landed a job at a startup basically through LinkedIn stalking, because I had a point in my career where I was out of work for about 5-6 months. So what I was doing, I was still like kind of going through job boards and hearing like absolutely nothing back. That's usually the nature of them. Instead, I was just lining up interviews with people on LinkedIn. I would just find who would potentially be like the hiring manager, future boss. In this case, it would have been director of account management, client services, operations, things like that. And just say, hey, I see that you guys are doing some pretty awesome work here. Would love to learn a little bit more. I also refer that, I saw that there was an opening. Would love to chat about it. This was my experience. This is some of the campaigns that I've worked on. This is what I've had to do. And I would just get interviews lined up that way. And I was able to land what was at the time my favorite job ever, because I just connected directly with the CEO and the SVP of ad sales, and they basically created a campaign manager position for me.
That's awesome. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing that experience. And so it sounds like just taking a page off of like the digital marketing playbook, video is king. It's not going away, even though I know a lot of, I personally prefer Clubhouse, which is kind of this new Silicon Valley darling, and it's audio only, but I think video is still the best way to connect right now with startups or any company, because it's personable. And so I guess the advice is to get comfortable in front of the camera. And with that, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit to the chat room. I'm seeing a ton of great questions, and I want to look at a couple of them. So let's start with, so the first one is, will startups look at boomers for management positions like director of marketing? And then another good one is, what are good software video, what are good like video softwares to use for that, besides, maybe like iPhone video or whatnot? So for all of our panelists, feel free to chime in if you have insight on that, which is, startups, do they look at kind of multi-generational for management positions? And then also, are there any good video software, apps or whatnot that you recommend?
At least I'll jump in because I tossed in the comments about Vidyard, Loom, and BombBomb. The reason why I recommended them is when you record the video, it actually hosts it on their pages, and you get all the analytics. And so you can see how many times people viewed your video. You can get those notifications. So if I sent Joe, a video saying, hey, Joe, I really love your company, I'm excited to watch, I can get a pop-up notification as soon as Joe watches it. And if he emails it around the office, I'll see that Joe's video, had 15 or 30 views, and that lets me own my application process a lot better. And that's true for all the three that I mentioned there. Personally, I also like the video because, like Joe said, it outs your age, your environment, all of that. And I say this with love in my heart because I'm a founder and a CEO, but a lot of startup founders and CEOs have their heads up their ass sometimes. And if you get filtered out because of that, that is also a really good indicator. It's not the kind of company you want to be at. Mm-hmm. So that question about, should I use video because maybe I'm older? My answer would be yes. The founders who care deeply about building a diverse team will gravitate towards that. And the people who use that as a way to filter out, you don't really want to work there anyway, because it's going to build a toxic environment. That's my take, but strong feelings on it.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you mentioned the diverse component. I think there's like a fear right now that working at a startup or kind of a younger company is nascent with, especially for a multi-generational workforce. Is my boss going to be 25 and is there going to be a gap? Like, is it going to be the right fit? And it 100% could be the right fit. And so just kind of embracing the newer technologies, like you mentioned, I've heard of BombBomb, good things about it. You just have to break that barrier. And then if you're not comfortable in it, then maybe it's just not a good company to work at, right? So a couple of the other ones I just want to skip down is, what is your advice for breaking into a startup as a Scrum Master? And then well, and then the next one in tandem to that is more on the technical side. What is the best way to put my video on LinkedIn? So for our panelists, the two questions are, any advice for breaking into a startup as a Scrum Master or project manager? And then if I do a video, what is the best way to spotlight it on LinkedIn or social media platforms?
For the LinkedIn piece, I recommend having it. So if you go into your LinkedIn profile, there is a section like in the bio called the featured section. You could put a video link in there and it'll kind of serve as a video introduction. Also, there's stories, there's other ways that you can highlight it. I would absolutely put it as a post so it shows up in feed. There's nothing wrong with kind of like recycling content every once in a while so that you stay top of mind, like any social network. Video is pretty engaging in terms of the different networks, but you would have to kind of like refresh it out there. I would also recommend, and this is also recent, this is something else you could kind of experiment with. LinkedIn recently announced live streaming, but you would have to have an account with something like StreamYard. I can't remember some of the other partners. They have a whole thing there. So that could be something else that you could use to really showcase yourself on LinkedIn, really like putting yourself out there.
I don't think you don't have to have like, like 28,000 followers to be LinkedIn Live, right? I think you can apply.
I got to apply. Like I have like 3,000 connections. I would say that.
Okay, so don't, like, for those that are like worried about just, having like a influencer community, it doesn't need to be like that at all. It's more LinkedIn just wants to make sure you add value. So I know it's kind of a feature that not a lot of people have asked for yet. So if you apply now, you could be an early adopter and have the LinkedIn algorithm favorably like display you or whatnot.
I would stress though, because Elisa, you brought up a point about like having 28,000 followers. Please, everybody, I cannot stress enough. You don't have to connect with that many people in order to have a powerful LinkedIn network. Quality over quantity, always.
Yes, yeah. We want to protect the sanctity of like LinkedIn. We want to be authentically sharing versus just, I hate to say it like this because it is important to grow your brand, but some of these vanity metrics, I think, is it kind of prevents you from like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And maybe it is having that many likes or whatnot, but if it just kind of is another barrier to what your true intention is. So just make sure that you're adding value, because what you put in is what you get out of it.
That triggered me a little bit because I used to also be a social media manager, and there would always be a client just like, well, we want all these followers. How come people aren't seeing us? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, you could have all these followers, all these likes and things like that. But at the end of the day, followers don't equate to customers. So
yeah, I totally agree. Okay, I've got a couple of questions that are more focused in the recruiting process. So the first one is, we'll keep it more general. And we can, any of the panelists, honestly, freeform, please feel free to jump in. What are questions a candidate may be asked by a founder or recruiter during the initial interview process?
Well, I'm not a founder, but I am a recruiter. And some questions that I think are really, really good, or things to talk about, is just really questions about like our mission and what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. Anything really showing that kind of your motivation and drive for what we're trying to accomplish, I think, is really important. I also think it's really great to ask about culture. Now, everything is remote, right? So talking about what it's like having a remote work culture and like what the company is doing to really embrace camaraderie and teamwork, I think is really important to kind of talk about and ask too. And then, just so all really good things to just kind of, think about when talking to recruiters, and all things I like to hear. If someone's asking me about the culture and kind of what we're doing, I'm like, wow, this person, does really want to be here. And if they're asking about our product, it just makes a lot of sense for what we're trying to accomplish. And so I get really excited about hearing those types of questions and things on my first call.
That's awesome. Any other feedback from some of our panelists?
I'll jump in. So I haven't done as many of the screening interviews.
Mhm.
But from that, hey, we're going to have the conversation with the founder or the CEO. The question about why do you want to work here is a really important one. Not just to show enthusiasm, but as a founder, you're really looking for people who can take the flag and carry it for you. Because I can only bang the drum so much. I can only wave the flag so much. I want people who can use my language and spread it. So when we ask that, we're not just looking for, yeah, I like startups, or, I want to work and level up. Ideally, you're finding someone who can use the similar language to what the founder uses and can help spread that culture, especially in a remote workplace. So that question is really important at all stages of the interview. The second question that founders will often ask is, like, where do you want to go? Like, what do you see as your next role? And there's a lot of assumptions that that question is trying to catch you up on, is this a long-term thing or do you want to move on? And that couldn't be further from the truth. The ideal is somebody who has an idea of what they want next, because as a founder, you're thinking about, hey, I really have this exciting person. I want to keep them excited. Is there a path where I can keep them excited and help them realize their potential? And so if you were entering in a support role and said, yeah, maybe I see myself in a leadership role or getting into product, that's great, because as a founder, you're thinking, great, that's an unfair advantage that I can give. I can help someone with their unique career path. It's not just that they have to fit this box. So those are two important questions. So they're not gotchas. They're opportunities to build alignment with the founder when they're the ones who are asking.
Mhm. Okay. There's no other feedback. I'm going to move to the next one, which I saw in the chat. I think Dan is asking, is startup looking more for people who have many skills so that they can be more cross-functional or more niche, I think. Hopefully I'm getting that right, Dan Chen. If that's not what you're asking, feel free to chime in, come off mute. Do our panelists want to weigh in on that? Is startup looking more for people with many skills so they can be more cross-functional? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't.
I'll chime
I
in
will
first to
say-
sorry.
No, you could go ahead, Joseph.
Oh no, I'm hogging the mic. Your turn.
Okay, well, we could double team this question.
Good.
I can say from my experience working in startups, or, I will say it's not even startups, even some more established companies could have startup environments, small teams. We would wear multiple hats, which is usually code for yeah, you're going to be doing things that weren't written in your job description. You just have to roll up your sleeves and just get the work done. So I would say that, like, and I've definitely had to do this, and I'm still doing this at my day job. So I think, like, the more for lack of a better term, like kind of entrepreneurial and more you can express that you can get other work done, whatever it does, whatever it takes to make sure that things are moving forward, that would absolutely work in your favor, and that would definitely be a plus if you want to be considered for, like, working in a startup environment. Joseph, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's like a plus one to everything that you said there, especially this applies, I think, both to startups and larger companies with that startup mentality. If you're looking for a good analogy to leverage, this is really common in technical roles, like engineering roles. They'll often talk about T-shaped engineers or developers, but that idea of you have a thin understanding across a lot of areas, but there's maybe one specific area you're exceptionally strong in. So your skills are T-shaped. Having a clear understanding of that, like if it's a marketing role, yes, I'm super strong at social, but yeah, I get a little bit of sales, a little bit of PR, but I'm really good on social. Knowing what your strength is, where you're deep, is really helpful, but they're really hoping for someone who can dabble and touch a lot of areas.
Mhm. That's awesome.
I think the reason for that too is because when you first join a startup, we need generalists. We don't need specialists yet, right? So it's really great if you have a really big blanket of knowledge about what you're doing. And he's right, specializing in one thing. So as the company will grow, you become a generalist, and now you're becoming more of a specialist in something that you prefer or that you like or that you're doing really well in. So I think being very adaptable as well and being willing to do things and just what's required of you and being able to portray that is more important than be like, here are all of my skills that are transferable. I think that'll be really helpful, like when interviewing and talking to founders or recruiters as well.
That's really important. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that. There's a follow-up question. So for Sachin is asking, do startups need talent for part-time or short-term consultant basis? And if so, how do you reach out for those roles or find out about it? And this can be for any of our panelists. Feel free to chime in. So the question is, do startups need talent for part-time or short-term consultant basis? And if so, how do you find out or reach out for those jobs?
I would say yes, for sure. And two of the most common places are, well, one is network, right? It's networking. The people who work at startups are like, oh my gosh, we need some assistance. So they're reaching out to their network. So if you are in the world of the people, let's say you have a startup that you really are like, that one seems like a great fit for me, or maybe you have a whole list of those probably. Being in touch with the people on those key teams that are the director of operations, director of design, director of whatever the unit or the functional area is, you'll often find that they're going to drop a post on their LinkedIn occasionally. Oh my gosh, we really need a UX designer to step in for like 2 months. Those things do pop up. And then also other startups that provide services like design marketplaces, if you're a designer, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak from example at Vave Health, the company I'm currently with now. We have 30 full-time employees and about 40 part-time contractors. And some only work like 2 or 3 hours a week, but they're very specialized, right? So I think at an early stage startup, it does make a lot of sense for them to invest, again, wanting people who are generalists, as I said before, right? But only needing a little bit of that focus on something very specific. That's where the contractors come in. And Joe, you're right, just following them, putting yourself out there, liking having conversations with different people's posts about contractors, I think will really kind of help you get there. But from my experience with Vave Health, yes, we use a lot of contractors all the time and from all over, the world. So it's pretty interesting about being a contractor too, is sometimes, or even remote, if you don't really have to be where we are. We work with a lot of people in, Amsterdam and Russia. It's really, really cool to kind of see everything coming together with all of their work.
Thank you, Michelle, for that insight and just kind of making people feel comfortable that there's more than one way to kind of get your feet wet in the startup space versus just full-time. You could do contractor basis or remote. There's a lot more flexibility now. I think it's in the workplace than there has been maybe like 10 years ago. So so be open to that. Don't feel like you need to take the full plunge in. There's many ways to get involved in the startup community. Like I myself have always been interested in it, but just coming from just a corporate background, I've done a lot of volunteering. And so that's another way to see if are you a fit even for the startup culture, because it sounds attractive. And especially if you hear about in the news all the time that, there's an early exit and there's these, millionaires coming from it. It's not all that it's cut out to be. So every startup has a different story. So you have to make sure that you're just a fit for it. So just my 2 cents. I saw a question up above and I kind of want to double back before we dive further into kind of the recruiting process. We have someone that's asking about doing a video. Would you keep the video to 2 minutes? What's the appropriate length? And then what do you include in the video? Is it just your elevator pitch? Do you talk about skills that you're good at? Or is it more about emotional, EQ, or what goes into I guess a video so that it's informative and substantive, essentially? Thoughts to our panelists? Any insight? Don't all jump in at once on this. Joe, I know you've done one, so.
I could take a little shot at it. And I'm actually kind of curious. I'd sort of love to hear from all the panelists about it. Narrative, right? You're trying to paint a narrative so they can go, who is this? What's their story? What would they bring to the table? Like you're just trying to give them a little shape, right? Because you've provided a resume and other materials. And so you want your video just to give them a sense of how you approach the world and what your story is. And so if you can create a narrative in a very quick way that says, I started out doing this and that led to me to be really interested in learning more about design or product or whatever it was that you do. And then, that led me to deepen my experience, and I've been, gaining skills in that area. And then I found you all, and it really caught my interest because, so you're making a narrative and then you're matching it to where they're going. I would say that process varies a little bit by startup. Of course, as Joseph mentioned earlier, you have to do your homework. But if you can kind of take that narrative approach, I think you're going to have some good luck.
I want to kind of piggyback on what Joe would say in terms of narrative and take it a step further in that if you're going to have a video, you also want to be really clear with the structure of that narrative. Stories have beginning, middle, end. I would kind of reverse a little bit and lead with some wins. So doing your homework and really determining what exactly do they need help with? What are the pain points? Why is there an opening to begin with? So like we'll use my example. If I'm a marketer, obviously, like if I'm going to apply to work at a startup, they need help growing. So I could lead with, hey, these are some of the campaigns that I worked on. This is the ROI that resulted in it. This is some of the most cost-effective campaigns that I've worked on that have resulted in more foot traffic, in more sales, things like that. So really kind of leading with your wins and some of the big things that you stand out and the problems that you're able to solve. That would, like, putting my recruiter hat on, if I get a candidate saying like, oh, this is how I was able to solve the problems that you need help solving, at the very least, that would warrant a conversation.
I'd love to add on yes to everything that Joe and Andrea shared. Make it a narrative, highlight the wins, what Joe said in the chat, script it, practice it. It is super awkward. Like standing up with your phone, it's like, I'm going to record this. And then you look and you're like, oh, I sound like a damn idiot. Then you do it again and you're like, oh crap, that cat was right over my shoulder. That's going to be distracting. And you're like, you do it again. You're like, oh, you couldn't see my eyes. And
well,
it's terrible.
You can have, I would say, if you have animals, bonus points, cuteness never will.
Totally, yeah.
Cuteness can go a long way. And would you really want to work with somebody, if you're a cat person or a dog person, you wouldn't want to work with somebody that doesn't like cats and dogs. Something is
Andrea, you teed that up well, because what I was going to add was that what matters is actually making yourself human.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like the animals are in there are real. And one of the big ways to do that is demonstrate what you're interested in. So Elisa, when you asked the question, I was thinking, because I was trying to reflect what of the videos I've received, which ones stuck out the most to me. And the couple that stuck in my memory were the ones where they asked really good questions. So one in particular, the video that I got, they capped it off and said, and I'm really hoping during the interview process, I get to chat with you because I see your journey going from HR tech to sales tech. And I'm really curious to hear what motivated you to make that leap. It sounded like a really, and maybe it wasn't an authentic question. Maybe I just fell for it hook, line, and sinker, but it sounded and felt like just genuine curiosity. And yeah, we talked about it in the interview. So yeah, let the cats be in there, like if you got them, but don't worry if it takes you multiple takes.
That's all great feedback. Thank you so much. And it sounds like, there's a lot of emphasis on storytelling and you want to make it personable. So whenever I hear storytelling, I always think of just car, circumstance, action, and a result. But like, do your research online, like what, goes into a good story, providing context, etc. And then obviously being personable and showing your personality is always good, because that's kind of the hook of, that person's video is intriguing. And so let's bring them in and see, just maybe like from a culture fit, at the very least, it's interesting, right?
Elisa, can I hop in quickly? One thing, the storytelling, yeah. One really, you used the phrase ninja earlier, so I'll borrow that, like the ninja move. There's that, if you've ever heard of or followed the idea of the hero's journey, you can Google it, you'll see there's a loop picture and all of that. When you're telling those stories in your interview, don't fall into the trap of making yourself the hero. The company should be the hero. It's a subtle thing. So if it's like a marketing role, it's not that I, as the employee, did this amazing thing. Like, yeah, talk about the stats, but it's about the outcome for the company. You helped, you were the coach, the wizard, the one who gave them a bit of insight and a bit of help, but the hero was the company. Because when you're interviewing, like if you're interviewing with me, I don't care that you had this accomplishment. It's what's the outcome for the company? Because I want to feel like that hero. I want the company to. So if you're leveraging storytelling, don't just think about it as a tale that's got a thread. There should be a hero who succeeds, and it's ultimately the company. So the way you tee it up, it's a subtle difference, but can be super powerful and impactful.
That's awesome. I'm gonna put a book recommendation in the chat. It's called Story Brand. It's by Donald Miller. I don't know, maybe the panelists have heard it, but he talks a lot about, like who is the hero, and he'll use like the Star Wars example of, and in this case, us as the job seeker, we're not, Luke Skywalker. We're more like Yoda. We're supposed to be the mentor. We're supposed to be guiding the hero to where they're ultimately going. So I'll put that recommendation in the chat, so it's a
So powerful. I agree with.
at very least. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I think I heard, I'm gonna move forward with a couple more questions because I know it's all relating together in the chat. One is, what are questions a candidate should be asking a founder or recruiter during the recruiting process? And then that'll also tie into one of the audience's questions on when to ask about funding and what that all looks like. So this is kind of a general question for all of our panelists. What are questions a candidate should ask a founder or recruiter during the process? And this can encompass like funding, early exit trajectory. So feel free to include anything in that realm. And so we can start with whoever wants to kick it off.
You had some comments earlier about equity. So just along that vein, a really good question to ask if you're talking to the founders or the executives is kind of what they envision as the trajectory of the company. Like, what do they aspire to accomplish? Don't tee it up as, do you want to build a big company? Because they'll just say yes, like that's their job. But startups might be venture backed, they might not. They might be private equity backed, they might not. They might be bootstrapped, they might be debt financed. There's so many mechanisms. This is an important question because if you want to be there for a short period of time and then move on to your next opportunity, their plans will make a big difference to you on that value of the equity. Like, if they don't plan to rush to scale and IPO, that means your equity will not be liquid. And when you leave, you may choose not to exercise those options, so the equity may not be worth much. If they do want to rush to an IPO, that equity could be worth a lot, so you'll want to consider that. If they are a bootstrapped company, they're privately funded, or they're going to be going to private equity, same thing. Your shares might always be locked up, so you might never get it out. So even just thinking about what their plan is, what the founder's intent is, can tell you, is this going to be a good fit for what you want to do, specifically as it relates to that equity? It's not just about how much you get, it's what can you do with it when you got it?
I do have a thought. I'm also, again, Michelle and Andrea, I'm like, yes, tell us your thoughts because I want to hear it. I think it's definitely important to ask about funding for startups. And the two questions that I have always asked and found useful are, tell me a little bit about this is to Joseph's point, tell me about your vision, like where is this going? And boy, it is you gotta be careful because the founder will talk your ear off about vision for like an hour and a half. But you do kind of need to know what their plan is, or at least their hopes and dreams are. And then ask them about milestones. Like, what's the next milestone for the startup? Are they going to try to get to 10,000 users or, 5,000 a month or 15,000 a month or 25,000 a month in recurring revenue and then raise another round? If they don't really have an answer to the milestones question, then either they're not really thinking about it or, maybe they're not focused or it's their first rodeo. And, you want to know if you're going into a startup, especially if it is in the early stages, you really want to know like what their milestones are so that you can think about what you're going to need to do to achieve those milestones. Right. And this sort of connected to that thing I would say is there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress in startups, especially in the early going. And there's a lot of advantages in that operations and generalist stuff. I think, Michelle, you touched on that, especially like really cool. You can learn and work across different teams and learn things, but that's a lot of pressure too, right? And so you really need to know what you're going into right off the bat. And if they don't have an answer to those kinds of questions, like what are the real milestones? What is the big picture here? Or they can't show you their homework in terms of how they're trying to figure that out, then you might be stepping into a potentially stressful and or toxic situation.
Joe reminded me of one more set of questions I'll ask, solidly kind of with that founder's hat on. And so these aren't questions for the founder, but questions for the recruiter. So when Michelle says, hey, our interview process, the last step is a chat with the CEO or the founder. The questions to ask there are, what's the purpose of that interview and how many people make it through? Because as a founder, and I invest in a lot of startups, I've got a lot of peers, and this is my language, there's no book about this. That founder interview is very bimodal. It's either an asshole or enabler interview. And I use these words because either the CEO, the founder is saying, I'm the last line of defense to make sure we have the right people in, and they pass like 1 out of 10 people through. And it's a very, intense interview process. And it's very disheartening because you get through 3, 4, 5 interviews, you think you're the last one, and all you get is a message is, oh, the CEO doesn't like you, sorry. And that happens and it sucks. And I never advocate for it, but there's still a lot of founders and CEOs who do that. The other type, the enabler interview, is where they really have delegated responsibility. And what they're actually there for is to sell you on the role. And so those interviews are great because then you get to ask any question you want because the CEO wants to tell you anything because they're super eager to get you on board and they're trying to get you closed. And those are 2 very different interviews. So knowing what you're going into is super important. And if it is one of those enabler ones and you made it to that last interview, you've got the job, you're there to impress and you put your best foot forward and you'll get the best offer. But if you've got to that enabler one, you know you're getting the offer. If you've got that other type, it's still going to be a tough one.
Michelle, I know you had some good questions about, when the candidate makes it through a little bit further in the recruiting process, what to maybe ask. And this maybe skews more towards like stock packages offered. How do you understand it? What can you ask about, like vesting schedule, cliff? Could you kind of maybe share just a brief synopsis? I mean, I know everybody can Google it, but it's always good to hear from like a recruiter, like, what am I allowed to ask about that? How do I understand it, or like outstanding shares, and just, if you will, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think something really important to know or just to realize is that a lot of people interviewing for startups asking about equity, some people really don't know what it is, and that's not anyone's fault, right? So I think it's really important to, one, going into a startup, you should probably do some prior research about what equity means, but some things that I think are really appropriate to ask a recruiter in regards to like equity and things like that is, you can ask about the strike price, what the standard vesting schedule is. Definitely can't ask about outstanding shares, unfortunately. Like, that's not something, we are able to share. Most people don't even really have access to that anyways. But, and as far as the amount of equity you may get when joining a company really depends on your seniority. So how much you'd be contributing to the company and at what stage do you come in at, right? So if the company has let's say 30 people and I'm employee 29, like, you're coming in and you're still going to get a lot of equity, right? Versus the company has 500 people and you're coming in as like 501, your equity is going to be a lot smaller. So understanding that the sooner you come in, is really going to play a big part in how much equity you get is going to be really important, and understanding that. You can also use like that question to leverage negotiations as well. I know it was something that, we kind of wanted to talk about, but maybe don't have the time to today, but definitely like towards the end of the process, if we are looking to make someone an offer, like, I love if someone's like, I want more equity. I'm like, yes, because but startups we're low on cash, especially if you're VC funded. Like, I can't just throw a huge salary at you, right? But if you really want to join the team and you want to make a difference and know that you're going to be here for 4 years, and after that 4 years you get all of your equity and you've done all this work, like, yes, like I want to hire you right now, right? So I think that's something you can really use to your advantage if you truly believe in what you're doing and what the company is doing. And I think that really will resonate well with like founders and recruiters. So you can definitely use your knowledge of equity like to your advantage versus like cash flow now. But you can pretty much ask any question. If they can't answer it or they don't know, they should say, I can't answer that or I don't know, right? But you know, they can always follow up and figure out anyways. But I think the number one question to not ask, or you're not able to really ask, is outstanding shares. That's just one we're never going to really be able to share for, I don't know why, we just can't do that. So I think there's a reason, I'm just not sure what it is, but hopefully that was helpful. You know, especially when coming towards the final stages. Equity is always a good thing to talk about. That gets us really, really excited, and understanding what it means is really important too.
I'll riff on Michelle's point there about the outstanding shares. It's like, as a founder to CEO, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with my team saying, hey, remember everybody, here's how many shares are out there, here's your percentage. Because straight up, it's small. It's like, hey, like, you don't want to go around reminding your team, by the way, you have 0.1%. By the way, like, so it's not something that you talk about, you don't share it. It's 100% fair question to ask. Like, if a candidate asks and your recruiting team or your talent team doesn't know, they'll say, well, we don't share that. The CEO might say, we don't disclose that. But if they don't have, like, if they're an early stage company, the value of the shares, like the strike price, is almost irrelevant, because it's like really whatever they put on paper. Knowing what percentage of the company you have matters. So it's fair to ask. They may choose not to share, but I'd still ask. The one thing I'd add is Michelle's comment about asking for more equity. Yes, always ask, even if you don't want it, because it shows alignment. There's a trend I'm seeing, and I fully endorse it personally, is as companies raise their round, they set very firm equity guidelines. So individual contributors, often up to directors, it's like, here's what you get. Executives often negotiate. But the reason why is equity is like a lottery ticket. It's worth nothing, or maybe it's enough to get a new house or a new car. And as we all talk and think about reducing pay inequity, reducing bias, it would suck to give someone 2 lottery tickets just because they happen to ask for it on their first day at the job. So I'm seeing more founders who are realizing to really eliminate pay disparities, they need to have very firm guidelines on their equity rules. So straight up, like, as a founder, I love it when people ask for more equity. And I'm always sad when I say, I'm sorry, we don't negotiate equity when we bring in frontline employees. We do top-ups on performance and contribution, but for first day, we hold it firm to make sure we're eliminating bias in our salary compensation and structure. So that one's always a fun conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things that I want to make sure people understand. So when you say strike price, what that is when you join a startup company, you join with your shares being at a strike price, which is literally the number that you can buy your shares at after you're fully vested. Fully vested is usually 4 years with a 1-year cliff, which also, all this jargon, right? And a 1-year cliff also means that, you know, you have to be with the company at least 1 year to be eligible for that equity. So if you're just looking for the short game, you're really not going to see a lot of that input. But getting in early with a low strike price, let's say $1, if the company does go public and the shares are worth, you know, $100 each, and you're able to buy them at that low strike price because you joined so early, which was $1, then you, after taxes, but you'll still be making a little bit of a profit there, right? So definitely something to keep in mind too. And when you're talking about VC, you know, companies giving people funding, just so you know, each time a company gets funding, the equity pool gets smaller. So if you're joining at a Series A startup, you're going to get way more equity than joining at a Series D startup, you know, just because they have kind of more clout in the industry. So just something to keep in mind as well, you know, when interviewing and talking about equity, that there are a lot of different nuances that go into like how much you get or whatnot. And it is really cool. I didn't know that like we could actually answer that question, Joseph. I thought it was just like a question that it was like super secretive, but it's nice to know that if I can maybe ask and be like, oh, hey, let me ask the CEO. Like, I'm not too sure. You know what I mean? So that's cool. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Different CEOs will be different levels of secrecy. So it depends, I guess, I think, the founder.
Yeah. Well, that was honestly, that was really a lot of good insight. And I know that's kind of a big topic of interest is in just when I'm moving forward in the recruiting process for a lot of our job seekers. I know just I want to be cognizant of time because I know I'm being respectful of Joseph because he's on the East Coast and other attendees might be spread out as well. We will close out the session just shortly after 7 p.m. Pacific, but we'll probably go a little bit over. So if you want to stay on, great. If you need to drop off, this is a fluid environment. It's totally fine. But I just have a couple more questions. One is more around the topic of negotiation, which we just touched upon. A lot of job seekers have a hard time with negotiating, and especially in certain populations that I don't want to say like culturally, but just the idea of asking for more is hard because of, maybe the offer that they get is already just a little bit higher than what they're making, and so they feel like, okay, I should just be happy that I even got an offer because right now it's just a tough time, right? Applying for jobs, but knowing your worth and asking for it never hurts to put that out there. But so for our panelists, what can you, if you can, offer maybe like sample scripts or, phrases or ways to broach the topic that the job seeker can use and adopt? That would be helpful. So just any ways to kick that conversation off, I think would be really helpful for job seekers.
Elisa, I'm so glad you mentioned that there have been like some groups, and let's be real, like a lot of women that I've worked with as clients, and also people of color, they don't negotiate more, they don't ask for more. And I've seen this as a recruiter, and a lot of other recruiters I've worked with have shared that almost every single female candidate that accepts an offer, she doesn't negotiate for more money. And to me, I'm just like, I am such a vocal champion, and I push my clients so hard. If you do not advocate for yourself, if you aren't going to, be your best champion, then no one else is. You have to ask for more. That's the only way that you'd be able to get more money. So just I cannot stress this enough. Do not be afraid to ask for money, even if they can meet you at, your desired range, even exceed that, you can still ask for more. And, I would just have to, just how I would kind of like go about some phrases that you could use to say like, oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited for this opportunity. Before even starting off those conversations, highly recommend going on payscale.com and doing your research, just seeing what that market rate would look like. Some startups, especially some of the earlier stage startups, they may or may not be able to meet you at the higher end of a range for you, but you can still, any company, any recruiter knows that a very good candidate is not going to stay on the market for that much longer. So if they want you, they will do what it takes to get you. They'll find the money. Don't worry about that. And definitely don't feel bad about, getting paid more because they won't have any problems paying you less if they can. But yeah, that's just like a couple ways that I would go about doing that.
I just want to echo like, yes, brilliant advice. I love what you just said about like, thank you so much for the offer. Like, I'm really excited about this opportunity. Can I think about it for a day or two? Like,
yeah, don't,
never,
oh my God,
ever
make sure you take the time, you don't feel compelled to accept the offer right away. Some companies would say like, oh, you have 24 or 48 hours to respond, which does not make any sense to me. I would say like you need at least a couple days to do your research, talk to people, practice the negotiation, just be very mindful with the conversations, because if not, you could be potentially leaving thousands of dollars on the table.
Yeah, and sometimes silence works, right? I'm sure you've seen it. Like sometimes you're like, I'm really excited. This is near the top of my list. I need a couple days. And the next day they're like, we want to lock it in. That is a negotiating tactic. And then I think something that was really embedded, and I love about what you just said too, was you're not negotiating just money. You're negotiating the next time you negotiate. You're negotiating the terms of your workplace. And I'm bringing this one up because, gosh, I have seen it myself, but also to be 100% real. I've especially seen this for my friends and colleagues who are women and women of color and non-gender binary. You need to let them know that you will be negotiating about all the terms of your workplace. Time spent, any extra work on projects, getting credit for what you do and appreciated. And so if you set the tone that you're going to be negotiating upfront and that this went great, but you can expect I'll be negotiating more in 6 months when I'm really delivering, you're just setting the stage. So you're not just negotiating salary. And that's why all of what you said is like, that's so powerful.
I'll double down on that as a CEO. When they say like their standard terms, like you have 24 or 36 hours, flip it back. You don't. Like no founding team, no startup team is going to go, oh, that offer expired. I'm sorry. Like, so it's totally fair to ask for more time or just say you need more time.
How long has the position been open, right? They could wait a couple days.
Exactly. And the last thing I'd share on negotiation, a really good way to think about it is what are the elements that are most important to you and push on those, always advocate for them. But the best thing is to think about it as negotiation. How do you get to a win-win? Because what the startup needs is a problem solved. There's areas that have more flexibility. If they just raise capital, they have more flexibility on cash, but maybe less flexibility on equity, or maybe they got more flexibility on vacation or the benefits options. And prioritizing what's most important to you. The difference between startups and more mature companies is the more mature companies have stricter frameworks and not as many levers they can pull, whereas a startup can. And the last thing I'll toss out, depending on the urgency of the role, like if they're hiring for 20 developers and you're one developer, this isn't going to work. But if they need like one growth marketer or they need one head of talent or something, you can put in milestone-based shifts to your comp. I have many times hired people where the actual employment letter and the agreement said, here's your salary. And when we raise a round that's worth more than 2 million or a series A or whatever, your salary will grow to X. So it's in that opening contract, not a vague promise. So you can actually do that like on a milestone-based approach. So yeah.
I just want to throw out there, and sorry, real quick, and add to it, Joseph, before I forget, because I've got pregnancy brain, is that I've actually seen on a letter, and I don't even know if this is common, is where a candidate, and we're talking to them, and Andrea, you mentioned it, it's hard to get women to feel confident about negotiating and asking for more. It's just,
and they can come to me. I will be their cheerleader. Like, I can't see other women just like shooting themselves in the foot because like they feel bad for asking for or they're afraid. No, I'm not. That is one of my missions.
100%. I've actually seen, we just helped a job seeker structure it because the startup, she was really excited. She really wanted to work for them, but they just weren't willing to kind of go up to what she was targeting, if you will. And so we kind of did the milestone approach, like Joseph was saying, in the sense that she said, hey, I'm going to do this for the startup. And when I hit this milestone, and I use social media because that's all I can think about. When I give you this many more users, engaged users in your community, or I deliver this, my salary is going to go up to 25%. So they kind of built kind of a system around it, and she ended up showing it to me. And so it was interesting because, I come from kind of a corporate background with traditional companies, and that's just, I don't know that would ever flow through, but in a startup, there's a lot of creativity. So it's almost like the more you throw out ideas of, okay, well, I know my worth. And so it's almost like you're putting in the effort upfront for sure, but it's also pay to play. If you deliver it, then they should pay you. And if they're willing to sign off on it, then, so on and so forth. So I know we're running a little bit low on time, but so I want to definitely close out the session. I would be respectful of those, especially Joseph in the East Coast, but want to just end with kind of a quick lightning round of, I know 2 questions that folks have been asking is, how do I find these elusive startup jobs, which everybody references AngelList. And so my end cap question to the panelists is A, where do I find startup listings? How do I find startup recruiters? And then B, what are some hot startup industries I can look into right now, to work at? So feel free to all chime in for those 2 areas, and then we'll go ahead and close it out. Thank you.
I can chime in on industries. if it wasn't so weird and boring to me, I definitely think like crypto and like that kind of realm, and blockchain is something I don't care about it, but like it will be the future, right? So if you're into that, definitely I think it's a really good industry. And then I think honestly, humble brag here, just Vive Health, we have wireless healthcare options, right? And things that are SaaS solutions. So it's really interesting to look at companies that are kind of changing that part of the industry. So going from something really archaic, like a medical device, to something that's handheld on your phone, right? So kind of, I think medical device is one that's really up and coming too. So those are the two that I would say, but I think more like crypto and blockchain are going to be the ones that I think are really, people will be really interested in, or would be really hot up and coming. And I don't remember the other question, but I'll let other people answer because I talked a lot already. So
I think like we're here to talk, so no worries about that.
Thank you.
Blockchain, crypto, healthcare. I would go more into health tech and not existing healthcare. I've been in healthcare for the last 5 years, and it is an industry that is ripe for disruption. It's just going to take some time to get there. Like, for instance, the technology for telehealth has been in place for years now. Insurance companies did not want to move on it, and yet they had no choice because of COVID. Another industry I would absolutely look into is cannabis, as more states, including New York, finally, they've legalized marijuana. In terms of finding jobs, I think angel.co is a great resource. I would absolutely just take the time to, I wouldn't say stop, but do your research on LinkedIn, connect with people directly. Oh my God, just the founding team on LinkedIn, the CEO, his or her team, you should be able to, if they're growing, they're looking for people, then they're going to be active on LinkedIn. One rule of thumb I recommend is to follow up, especially on LinkedIn. So even though there are going to be people that are pretty active, sometimes people are busy, sometimes we don't respond right away, or sometimes we see something and we don't take action. So don't be afraid to just follow up every once in a while, just to make sure that you're kind of on the radar, to keep the conversation going. And let's see, and I would also hang around in Clubhouse rooms. I think Clubhouse is going to be on Android next month, finally. So Android users rejoice, but if you're on an iPhone, if you still need, you still need access to Clubhouse, I highly recommend it, because you could literally just drop into any room and just talk. And there's a lot of networking rooms on there. There's a lot of rooms for pretty much every single topic. People have gotten jobs on Clubhouse. There have been articles about it. So definitely, in my opinion, building those relationships will take you much further than just finding the job openings, because then you'd be able to stay top of mind. And if you can hit it off with somebody, then it would be a lot easier for them to just be like, hey, I know that, you're an expert in so-and-so. I need help with this. Can we have a conversation? So networking is the way to go.
I'll kick it over to Joseph. Yeah.
I love this question because we all have such different answers. These are the best. Thank you. We have an audience here that's thinking about, how do I get into startups? So like not necessarily familiar, looking at a transition, maybe from traditional industries to more emerging ones. So with that in mind, for where to find the jobs, I'd be looking for companies that work in industries or spaces that they've got a clear path to success. So like Michelle's comment about crypto, it's really exciting right now. But candidly, most of the founders that I know in this space, I'm like, you're batshit crazy. Maybe you're going to win, but I'm not doing it. And that's really exciting, but it's also really tough. So I would, if someone's looking to kind of get into a space and optimize for a company's chance of success, enterprise software and e-commerce. Like they are in early innings as industries. Like the big companies of the future haven't yet started, but the business models are understood enough that as an investor, you're like, okay, this company knows how to do it. Like it's a really clear playbook, which means they know what roles to hire. So the job you get is going to be there. It's not going to change underneath you. So that's the first thing. So enterprise software, e-commerce, where to find them, I would actually go to the big VCs. Most of them are running job board aggregators. So you go to Andreessen Horowitz, you go to Kozla, you go to all of them, they run job boards. The way those job boards work is they suck in the jobs from the applicant tracking systems that the startups use. The reason I suggest that is that means the startup there has to have their act together enough that they're running an ATS. So, they've got someone in Michelle's role or someone who's running it who's actually going to catch your application. Really early stage companies, really early ones, they're just posting them on Twitter, they're posting them on LinkedIn, and they never get it into an ATS. So just from that sense of transition and optimizing odds, that's how I would gamify it.
Yeah, I also posted in the chat too. LinkedIn does a lot of articles about top 100 hottest startups that are hiring, or like top SF startups. So if you don't even know where to start, just go to LinkedIn, just go to Google and look up hot startups in San Francisco, like hot industries or wherever you are, and like things will come up. So, definitely utilizing those tools. There's a lot of info out there, about what startups are up and coming and things like that. So that's a really good way to find, the company, look at their website, go to their LinkedIn, find the recruiter and the hiring manager, and just kind of start hugging the company, as I like to call it, sending out emails, being visible, liking their posts, going to their clubhouse, different things to let them know you want to be there. I think those are all really really good ways to really kind of put your name out there and start finding startups. And I think it's important to look at an industry you're interested in too. Like how I said, yeah, Bitcoin and crypto is really cool, but I'm not interested in that, right? So even though it might be the future, I wouldn't be happy in that type of job, right? So I think one of the first steps too is really understanding what opportunity would make you really happy and what company you would really be excited to work for, because just kind of wrap it up, that's what it's all about working at a startup, right? So I think that's going to be the most important part when going through your job search and starting, is knowing exactly what kind of company you want to work for. It'll be really helpful and everything will just kind of hopefully fall into place.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I know we went 15 minutes over, but I want to thank all of our panelists, Andrea, Michelle, Joe, and Joseph. Honestly, thank you so much for volunteering your time with the Albert's List community. Again, Albert's List is sponsoring this webinar and then our panel series. And just a couple of notes, we have a lot of resources and events coming up, and then just kind of a plug for Clubhouse. We also partner with the Career Doctor. It's a big career resource club on Clubhouse. We help host their job fairs, and it's a good way to learn about a lot of different jobs all at once. So they have a very unique format the founders created, in the sense that the recruiters will get up there, they'll do a quick 45-second to 1 minute overview of the role and job they're looking at, and then we'll bring up folks from the audience that are fit. So if there's a senior UX designer role open, you'll have someone from the audience say, I'd love to connect. And so it's kind of like speed job fair networking, if you will. So I'm a big fan of that. That's helped a lot of job seekers just get instant feedback on if they're a viable candidate or not. There's many different ways to job search right now. And so we're here for you, the Albert's List community. I know Joseph has a great network and his company does a lot as well. So please connect with everybody, connect with our panelists, and go ahead and close out the event. Thank you all for joining us and spending a little bit of the night with us, and have a good rest of the week. Take care.
Thanks,
All
y'all.
right.
See ya.
Thank you. And one more thing, just wanted to share all of our upcoming events. Thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you again, Elisa, for co-hosting. And we'll see you for our events next week, including our 100th virtual event since COVID-19 began and sent us all to home. We have a mock interview this upcoming Monday for a B2C brand marketing manager. And I also saw that imposter syndrome was mentioned in the chat section. So there's also an event on that coming up next week as well. And we'll hope to see you at both. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.